Good morning. Welcome to another episode of HardFoul Radio. Appreciate you for tuning in today. This is the show that values time, so let's not waste any. Coaching matters. And I hate that we have to come out here every now and again and re-emphasize this point, but coaching matters. It always has, and it always will. But I was thinking to myself, what's a really good way to push the point home to show you how much coaching matters? I could give you individual cases. I could give you Nick Saban in Alabama, Belichick in New England. But we know those. Those are common. Those are obvious. Those are the huge outliers that you don't need to fight for. I give you Popovich in the NBA. But what if I gave you the more down-to-earth, common man, anyone can relate to it? What if I gave you the impact coaching has had on an individual state? Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the impact of coaching and the state of Colorado. Let's look at multiple different sports, multiple different leagues. Let's start in the NBA, where the current world champions reside, the Denver Nuggets. What did the Denver Nuggets do with their coach? Well, the Nuggets, let's look at their history of coaching. Let's go the last 20 years. I won't bore you with guys that you've never heard of or never watched coach from the 70s and 80s. Let's be real-time relevant. The two best coaches of the last 30 years for the Denver Nuggets have been, obviously, Mike Malone and George Karl. Now, what's the difference? George Karl was an old-school coach who believed only his way could win. You were either going to get with his program or you were going to get the fuck out. There was no, you're a great offensive superstar and we're going to thrive under that success, Carmelo Anthony. There was no, this is the team we have and I'm going to adapt to my players, not force them to bend to me, Kenyon Martin, Allen Iverson. And what do you know? Denver, while they put up regular season wins because they obviously always had the talent, which talent has always mattered in sports. You need a Giannis Antetokounmpo to win an NBA Finals, NBA championship. You need a LeBron James to win an NBA championship. You need a Nikola Jokic to win an NBA championship. But what happened with Denver? That era did not win a title. You can make up all the reasons you want, but that coach did not win a title with those players. And they had more than enough talent to. I don't want to hear about other superstars in the league because every great coach runs up against other great superstars in the league. Then you have Mike Malone. And Mike Malone didn't come out the gate 60-win seasons or final appearances or have this great group of superstars to start off. He built a culture. He set an identity similar to George Karl. But then he started to adapt to his players. I have Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray is not a conventional point guard. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to build an offense that works with Jamal Murray because he's not conventional, but he's my point guard. He is the second best player I got. I'm going to make this work with him. Nikola Jokic, a second-round pick who the franchise had no intent to turn into a rotational player, let alone turn into a superstar face of the NBA. Mike Malone adapted. That's coaching. Where is Mike Malone now? He has a ring. He gets to shit talk the Lakers all off season. He's an NBA champion. Coaching basketball in the state of Colorado. Let's go to the right now story. Football. Who is the most talked about college football team? Not even close. It's Colorado. And no one thinks Colorado's the best team in the country. No one thinks Colorado's one of the 5 best teams in the country. The impact Deion Sanders has had on a college program, not just the impact on the field where the product, this team won 1 game last year. It's a 1-star program, and you guys know me. I'm not the college football guy. I'm not going to sit there and break down the last 30 years of Colorado Buffaloes football. But a 1-star program, it's not very good. And there's a reason they were a 1-star program. And Deion, almost overnight, Now, part of that is the transfer portal. It's a lot different to fix a program collegiately than it is professionally, whereas professionally, you can hit a big free agent class or get a good guy in the draft, but it still takes more time. Deion came over there. He did a cultural reset. Not just the players he brought in terms of what they provide on the field, but a cultural reset, what they do for the fan base. This is still a collegiate sport that it has to advertise because it wants former students who now have money to give back to the program. That's how you get these massive USC, UCLA type institutions, these great benefactors who give back to these collegiate programs. And the best way to advertise is if you are Deion Sanders, you gave that program as much star power as you had. And Deion's one of the most highly accoladed and all well-deserved athletes of our lifetime. Deion had people watching Colorado State at 1 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast. That doesn't happen without Deion Sanders. And it's not just the hype, because as we said, the product on the field, well, no, they're not a top 5 program right now. They're not a top 10 program right now. No one thinks they're a top 5 or top 10 team for this season. But do you know the kind of pull you have to have? Caleb Williams is in his conference, a generational Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence, Peyton Manning level of quarterback, not style, is in their conference, and USC is a top 5 team. USC is a top 5 program, and Caleb Williams is potentially on his way to getting his second straight Heisman, and he's an afterthought. The Colorado Buffaloes are the talk of college football. That is Deion Sanders and his impact on coaching in collegiate football. Now let's go to the other side of it, where sometimes coaching is not that great. Let's look at the Rockies. Can you name a influential or highly impactful manager for the Colorado Rockies the last 20 years? You can't. Even if you're an avid fan of the team. We know great managers in baseball, which it's really hard to have consistent success as a manager in baseball because there's multiple things that not only impact what you can do on the field, but there is multiple things off the field that are factors. Like, are your owners a bunch of cheapskates like the Rockies? Yeah. So it's harder to be a great manager. But that lack of a great manager shows. And this is why the Rockies have these huge spike years. I mean, going all the way back to 2007 where they made the World Series. And they have a couple of great postseason runs, these one-year moments. And then they fall into obscurity. They don't have a great manager. They don't have great coaching. And that is unfortunately the impact of coaching and managing on Major League Baseball in the state of Colorado. And let's go with the one that's closest to my heart, the impact of coaching in professional football in the state of Colorado. The Denver Broncos have, in my opinion, one of the greatest, and probably the greatest to not be recognized for it, head coach in NFL history in Mike Shanahan. Mike Shanahan was let go in 2007. Think about all the different coaches Denver has had since then. Think about them. You have your Josh McDaniels. You have your Vance Josephs. You have your Gary Kubiaks. You have, it's just a long list of, we talk about all the time, how long does it take a franchise to recover from a great quarterback? Dan Marino with the Dolphins, Elway with the Broncos, Jim Kelly with the Bills. How long does it take to recover from that? Well, how long has it taken the Broncos to recover from their great head coach, which I understand there's a Super Bowl in between Mike Shanahan being let go and now, but guess who won the Super Bowl? Gary Kubiak. Basically Mike Shanahan Jr. Same offense, same system, and was given a massively talented roster to go with the leftovers of great coaching that Mike Shanahan left him with. And a very good coach in his own right. What have we said the last 5 to 6 years with Denver's coaching? Well, Fangio couldn't get the offense right. Vance Joseph couldn't get the offense right. Now let's look at him this year. Sean Payton's there, and yes, they're 0-2, and I understand there's a bunch of people like me who are frustrated as hell the way they lost these last 2 weeks. But Sean Payton in 2 weeks, all offseason, but in 2 weeks of actual play, the Broncos are number 1 in points per possession. You won't know that, and it's hard to feel that way when you're 0-2, but those are facts. They are number 1 in points per possession. Sean Payton, as a great coach, came there and immediately made an impact. Now, where's Denver struggling? Surprisingly, defensively. Well, they went from Fangio, who was a great defensive coach, Evero, who's shown to be a great defensive coach, and now Vance Joseph, who was not only a bad head coach, currently is trending towards being a bad defensive coordinator. Coaching matters. I gave you one state. One state. Dion with college. Sean Payton in the NFL. Mike Malone in the NBA. And the Rockies are a crapshoot. Coaching matters. And coaching doesn't just matter for your X's and O's. And I know that's where guys start to really get their compliments when they're an offensive genius, like we think Mike McDaniel and Sean McVay, or they're a defensive guru, Belichick, Vic Fangio. But a large part of this is leadership. You need great leadership. And I'm someone who has always gone back and forth in my own personal life of arguing, fighting, sometimes being dismissive of leadership, because I've always been, for the most part, a self-starter. I didn't need someone to ride my ass to get me to be motivated. I didn't need someone to ride my ass to get me to do my job. I was always pretty self-motivated, could do things on my own, and for the most part, was generally annoyed by people trying to tell me what to do. But when you're those kind of people, like I am, you start to look around and go, you know what? The other people at my position, the other people at my level, they're not as motivated. They're not as intentional as I am. They need someone to lead them. They need someone to manage them. And a great leader figures out how to work with both. And the leadership. Look at the great leaders in sports. Sometimes it's a player, and we give the credit to a Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, a LeBron James for being just these overall great players and being great leaders. But for the most part, coaches are the epitome of great leaders. Great coaches are the epitome of being great leaders. And you see it impacted. Look at one state. Dion, Sean Payton, despite the 0-2 start, and Mike Malone. Dion's got the most talked about college program in the sport. Mike Malone is a reigning NBA champion. And despite 0-2, Sean Payton has the Broncos, who have been a shit show offensively 7 years running, number 1 points per possession. And the one where you can clearly see bad coaching, bad management, bad leadership, the Colorado Rockies. Coaching matters. Look at coaching in Colorado. Man, I had to get that off my chest. We got a lot to talk about here today. We got more to talk about the Broncos, unfortunately, who have turned are like about a season away from being a poverty franchise, which is really disheartening to say. We have some overreaction and underreactions to go. But when we come back, we also got to talk about one quarterback who I just don't think is elite. Sorry. Not sorry. This is HardFoul Radio.
Spence. Nigga, where am I going? Drop the four in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? Drop the four in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going?
Welcome back. This is HardFoul Radio. Appreciate you for joining with me today. I want to discuss, and this is probably going to come off as controversial, I don't care, a quarterback who has been deemed elite, but I think we have to really define what it means to be elite, and we really have to reevaluate this quarterback. Justin Herbert has thrown for the most yards, most completions, most touchdowns in a quarterback's first 2 years starting. Congratulations. In any other era of football, you would be the bar, you would be the standard, you would be the golden child, except you don't play in any era of football. A lot of times as people, we have trouble with this. We have a lot of trouble differentiating what is great then and what is great now. Except basketball fans. Apparently basketball fans seem to have a real good sense of it, where they acknowledge guys from the 50s and 60s were great for their time, but would not compete today. Football players, football fans, I need you to start understanding this as well. Herbert has all of the stats to, in any other era, be considered the best quarterback ever, to be the best quarterback ever to start a career. Everything would be there for him to be the guy. So why isn't he in this era? Because this era is different. We all know 4,000 yards isn't what 4,000 yards used to be. We all know 1,000 yards receiving for a receiver isn't what 1,000 yards receiving used to be. There's great quarterbacks for their eras that never got to 4,000 yards, or they did it seldomly. Donovan McNabb, multiple NFC championship games, a great quarterback. He wasn't over 4,000 yards every season. Kurt Warner, he was kind of revolutionary that he was getting to 4,000 yards during the times he was with the Rams and then with the Cardinals. Ben Roethlisberger didn't throw for 4,000 yards every year of his career. We have to compare great then and great now, and they're two different standards. Tom Brady didn't throw for 4,000 yards every year of his career. Think about that. Now, I'm not counting the injured year. Herbert, despite all these statistical accolades in his first 2 years, what has he done? This is the era of what have you done quarterbacks. And Justin Herbert, to his contemporaries, what has he done? In the first 2 years, Jalen Hurts got his team to a Super Bowl, was a potential MVP player. He was an MVP candidate, but he didn't end up winning the award. Lamar Jackson, in his first 2 years, was an MVP, unanimous MVP. Joe Burrow, in his first 2 years, and this is the great, don't tell me he doesn't have enough talent, don't tell me the organization's bad. Joe Burrow, in his first 2 years, got the Cincinnati Bengals, one of the most historically dysfunctional franchises of all time, to a Super Bowl. And of course, the actual gold standard of the era, Patrick Mahomes, within 2 years, had an MVP and a Super Bowl, and almost broke the NFL record for touchdowns in a season. These are the current standards of greatness. Don't compare Herbert because he is statistically what Otto Graham was to the 60s, or what Fran Tarkenton was during his era, or what Joe Montana and Jerry Rice did in the 80s, or what Marino did in the early 90s. He is not a part of those eras. His greatness and his success cannot be defined by the same things that defined those guys' greatness during their era. This is an era because it is a pass-happy NFL, because it is a protect the quarterback NFL. All these guys are setting statistical records. Hell, Matt Stafford, who was drafted in 2009, when he came into the league, his first 5 years, and I believe up till year 8, even 7 or 8, had the most yards ever through that point in his career. Matt Stafford was the statistical bar. So we all knew Matt Stafford was a good quarterback. but he never won. And that's the current trajectory that Herbert's on. And I think Herbert, might not even technically get to the accolade Stafford did. Stafford got a Super Bowl. Now he had to leave. He had to leave Detroit and go to LA to get a Super Bowl, but Herbert's already in LA. Herbert's already gotten this new massive all-time contract that was only topped by Joe Burrow. He's already got the Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and they keep drafting guys. He's already got what's supposed to be a good to great defense with a Joey Bosa, a Derwin James, a Khalil Mack. Then how come they're not winning? How come they're not as successful? And you can't just blame the coach. Yes, I don't think anybody is going to Brandon Staley's defense as a great head coach. But no one was going to bat for Zach Taylor as a great head coach. Some people tell you now they still don't know if he's a great head coach. No one went to bat for Nick Sirianni, and there's still people that after both of those coaches who have made it to Super Bowls, no one goes to bat for them as great all-time head coaches. Yes, Mahomes got Andy Reid. He hit the jackpot. None of these other guys did. When Lamar got to John Harbaugh, there was talks in Baltimore, should they renew his contract? Now, he had already won a Super Bowl, and I think they would have agreed to mutually part ways. But don't act like Lamar Jackson has not increased and given John Harbaugh, made him millions of dollars by extending his contract, by extending his career. What has Herbert done to be considered elite? Because he throws a pretty football? Because he throws for 5,000 yards or almost 5,000 yards? Great, he puts up stats. So did Matthew Stafford when he was early in his career with Detroit. And we never called Stafford elite. We all knew Stafford was good. We never called him elite. I remember I thought Stafford was borderline elite, and I got made fun of when I threw out that opinion. So what is Justin Herbert but a poor man's early Detroit version of Matt Stafford? Yes, he's going to have all the statistical records. Yes, I keep saying, they're the first team to score 50 points, no turnovers, and be 0-2. Well, some of that has to be on your quarterback. It's the most unfair, fair game in the world. Quarterbacks get all the praise. Quarterbacks get all the blame. This is a new era of quarterback. What have you done? What have you won? You don't have any accolades, Justin Herbert. You don't have an MVP award. You don't have an Offensive Player of the Year. You don't have a Super Bowl. You don't have, you don't even have an appearance. You have one playoff game where you got up 28-3 and lost it. Why is he elite? And I know I'm just going to sound like a hater because I'm a Bronco fan, and I can tell you I'm about to rip them too next segment. But why is he elite? Let's talk about it. This is HardFoul Radio.
Nigga, where am I going? Drop the four with my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? Drop the four in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going?
Welcome back. This is HardFoul Radio. The Broncos are about a year away from being a poverty franchise, and that hurts my heart. I've loved this team for years, well over a decade plus, probably going on this, I think is my 15th, 16th year being a fan. I've told the story before. I watched, my very first football game was Chargers-Chiefs. I didn't like either team. By the time the game was over, my uncle had an NFL poster with all the 32 teams. I went over and I looked at it, and I pointed at the horse and said, I like this team. And I went up, and it was the Broncos. And I had to go start researching their players. So I have no idea who the hell's on the team, but now I'm going to make myself interested. Because I didn't want to be a Charger fan. I didn't want to be a Chiefs fan. I then enjoyed some very wonderful and fond memories I got pretty much the beginning of the Jay Cutler experiment, which has some really cool fond years, like that young core. It was still towards the end of the Shanahan era, so there's a bunch of different running backs in there, but like a Selvin Young. Obviously, then they ended up with Brandon Marshall, Tony Scheffler, and like you started to see a core really start to appear there. And then unfortunately, Cutler's situation didn't improve with the team, so then he was traded to Chicago. Marshall was gone. Scheffler was gone. Felt like a rebuild. Then they went to Kyle Orton. Then we have the Tim Tebow year, and I'm not going to bore you guys all, but you know my story at this point. Then we got to the climax, which is 2015. Denver won a Super Bowl. I was never sure if, even though when they got Peyton Manning and he was winning MVPs and they were putting up all these numbers, the Super Bowl to Seattle was such a damning blow to like my sports confidence that I started to wonder, am I going to be one of those fans who waits 60, 70 years to see my team win a championship? And I'm talking about really seeing him win a championship. Denver technically won a championship when I was 3 and 4 years old. Congrats. But since that 2015 team, Denver's put up 7 years of unapologetic, mediocre, below average, unfun, and boring, terrible product of a field, of a football team performing on the field. And it's really unfortunate. And when I say Denver's about to become a poverty franchise, I don't think people quite understand what that means. Denver becoming a poverty franchise, as wild as it may seem, doesn't actually have anything to do with them scoring the least amount of points in NFL history through essentially half the season, almost the full season with a first-year head coach last year. It doesn't have anything to do with, despite retaining the core roster of a Super Bowl champion, not making the playoffs. It doesn't even have anything to do with going through 6 straight losing seasons, 3 different head coaches, and trading away one of the franchise's best players in Von Miller. No. The real reason is, and while those are factors, the real reason is Denver has entered delusional. The Raiders historically have enough accolades to be considered one of the better franchises in football. Do you know why they're not? Because they went through about a 10 to 15 year stretch of delusional. The Raiders went to the Super Bowl in 2002. They then went into delusional mode. And Denver's doing the same thing. For about 3 to 4 years, Denver thought it was close because it still had competent and at some times great defenses. Von Miller, Aqib Talib, the no-fly zone was still intact for several years. Brandon Marshall at linebacker. And so they were in games. Hell, they even had Trevor Siemian, who I remember the highlight of watching Siemian versus the Cowboys. Blew the Cowboys out, and we thought, we got our guy. Trevor Siemian wasn't the guy. But they followed up this delusion by giving Case Keenum a contract. Maybe he can work. Bring in Joe Flacco. We're still really close because our defense is still there. We still have Vaughn. We still have these other great players on defense. Denver wasn't close. And the record started to reflect. You don't get Bradley Chubb by being close. He was a top 5 draft pick. You don't get Patrick Surtain by being close. He was a top 10 draft pick. And slowly but surely, Denver, waiting until the last possible second, had to slowly start getting off of some of these Super Bowl remnant players. Aqib Talib, TJ Ward, Emmanuel Sanders. Slowly but surely, everybody started to go. But Denver was still close, and I believed it almost every single year. Well, we still have Vaughn. Oh, we have Vaughn and Chubb now. Oh, we're going to have consistent quarterback play, and that's really all this team needs. Denver's done it by believing they were closer than what they were because of a Super Bowl that, while it took every last bit of Peyton Manning's arm and every last bit of Von Miller and the no-fly zone's greatness. It was truly a flash-in-the-pan moment. Denver hasn't been close nor competitive realistically since 2015. This is a franchise that didn't have consecutive losing seasons in 60 years. They're on 6 straight. And they've done it all. They've brought in the veteran quarterback. They've drafted quarterbacks. Even drafted and then retraded for him. Brock Osweiler. Drafted Paxton Lynch. Brought in the journeyman. Brought in the guy they think could be the gap, but serviceable with a great defense, quote unquote. And now they've hit the last part of delusion. Bring in Russell Wilson. We're still just a quarterback away. We have Patrick Surtain. We have Justin Simmons. We are still have the makings of a potentially great defense. We've put up these really good defensive rankings, and now Russ is going to take us over the top. Russ is 4-13 as a starter. Now we're going to bring in Sean Payton. That's all we needed. We haven't had the great head coach. Now we have the great head coach. He's going to fix our quarterback. We still have a great defense. And yes, I said earlier in the show, Denver leads the league in points per possession. So Sean Payton, something is working there. But now the defense is no longer holding up. When you're a bad football team, something always goes wrong. Everybody complained about the game on Sunday, about the way that it ended. Yes, I agree. It was pass interference. It was clear as day. You don't get to complain about pass interference clear as day when you're up 21-3. You should have never been in that position, and the only reason you got in that position is because you played like shit once you got up 21-3. And then you got a very lucky Hail Mary to get you in that position for a 2-point conversion. It was clearly pass interference. It doesn't matter. Washington outplayed them. Couldn't move the ball in the second half. When you're bad, something always goes wrong. To others that have suffered to the degree that I have with the Broncos, remember the Minnesota game from a few years ago? It was Cortland's son. There was clear pass interference there too. Guess what? Didn't matter. Denver was a bad football team. They didn't deserve to win that Minnesota game, and they didn't deserve to win the game on Sunday. And if they lose this year with Sean Payton and with Russ playing better, but now the defense just isn't quite what it was because it's years removed away from Fangio and a year moved away from Evero, something always goes wrong with bad franchises. And delusional franchises, like the Raiders post their Super Bowl, and currently the trajectory Denver's on post its Super Bowl. They hold on to these things that aren't actually there. It's unfortunate because that's my favorite franchise. That's my team. I love them. But they're closer to delusional than they are competitive.
Spence.
This is HardFoul Radio.
Nigga, where am I going? Drop the foe in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? Drop the foe in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going?
Welcome back to our final segment here on HardFoul Radio. So we got to close today off with, I talked a lot off season about how it feels like Mike Tomlin gets away with things that Belichick is getting criticized for. Tomlin doesn't have a playoff win the last 5 years. Tomlin, well, yes, we know the stat never had a losing season, is clearly declining from the terms of his pinnacle of success to now, similar to Belichick, but Belichick has still won a Super Bowl in his last 5 years of coaching. Well, it is 5 years apart now. Belichick has 6 rings. Tomlin has 1. There is still, while we all respect Mike Tomlin, know he's a great head coach, there is a massive Grand Canyon gap between Mike Tomlin, the greatest football coach of all time. You know who else gets a pass, and I have no idea why? Because it's it'd be one thing like we like Mike Tomlin. That's partially why Mike Tomlin gets a pass. Who likes Deshaun Watson right now? Think about it. Deshaun Watson over his time since he's come back from his allegations and from his suspension has played worse than one Russell Wilson. But guess who gets almost all of the mainstream criticism? And guess who avoids it? Now, maybe there's something I just don't know because I don't work for one of the big ESPN, FS1, one of the big sports media groups. And maybe it's a hush situation because they just don't really want to talk about what happened with Deshaun Watson. And I could consider that valid, except why do you not wanting to talk about him allow him to hide behind what is a worse contract than Russell Wilson, a fully guaranteed $230 million that the Browns have literally no way to walk or get away from? Hell, the Broncos, because they have the richest owner in the sport by a mile, and if Wilson sucks it up again this season, they could actually eat his contract because they'll be paying a rookie quarterback during the duration of Russell's mega contract. Versus the Browns, and the Broncos get out of part of it. They're not entitled to pay him everything, only the guaranteed part. The Browns said everything was guaranteed. They stuck their neck out for the guy. Said, we don't care what's going on. We don't care about the allegations. We signed him before even all the court proceedings were done. Said, that's our guy. Can we talk about him? I'm going to make this one much shorter than the other segments we did here. But could we talk about it? Underperformed, has not looked even remotely good, let alone great. And I know we have these fond memories of when he first got to Houston, and I think a large part of his Houston impact was the fact DeAndre Hopkins, who was one of the best receivers of the last decade, and DeAndre Hopkins did something that was incredible, which is he had 4 straight seasons with 4 different starting quarterbacks, and he went over 1,000 yards with all of them. And he had some horrible starting quarterbacks. But he was that great that it didn't matter who was throwing the ball, he was still DeAndre Hopkins regardless of quarterback. And then he got Watson, and I think there was this almost hope of like, oh, he finally has a guy. He put up another all-pro season. But can we talk about him now? Because that player's never coming back. Especially if you watch last night's game, you watch week 1's game. I don't care what the Browns' record is. They're winning in spite of him. Not because of him. They're winning in spite of him. And unlike Russell Wilson, who I know is a little corny, and rubs some people the wrong way because they think they're too cool, and that's whatever. I'm not here to get into personals. Russell's not what that guy is. Russell's never done the horrible things that guy did. Russell's contract's not as bad, and objectively, Russell has played better. Russell has shown flashes of the player he used to be. This guy hasn't. Can we talk about it? Can we talk about it? As always, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. This is the show that values time. I value mine. You should value yours. Can't wait to see you guys tomorrow. We out.